been killed in any movement or unrest so far. In the capital, Tehran, videos show a blaze and thick black smoke emanating from several shops and a bank in the neighborhood. CCTV footage from Tehran, meanwhile, shows the inside of Abu Zar Mosque, which was vandalized last week. In the days that followed, reports emerged of the mosque being set on fire as the situation spirals in the country. The deadly clashes have killed not just demonstrators and security officials, but many innocent bystanders as well. Eyewitness accounts from the medics and locals claim that a bank employee and a few others who were not involved in the demonstrations have also been killed. These individuals were either shot at or hit by a brick on their head, leading to the death. As unrest and chaos spirals in Iran, digital blockade largely remains in place. According to an international monitor, the shutdown has crossed the 90-hour mark with no announcement or decision from authorities to lift the internet ban. That has been happening inside Iran. But remember, outside the country, Iranian diaspora has been reviving up support for the protesters in their homeland. In London, the demonstrations initially took place in front of the Iranian embassy and later moved to the 10 Downing Street in front of the British Prime Minister Keir Starmer's residence. Over 2,000 people gathered in Paris, waving Iran's flag from before the Islamic Revolution in 1979, chanting "No to the terrorist Islamic Republic." The police did not allow them to approach the Iranian embassy. The vast majority of protesters were in favor of the return of the Iranian monarchy to power, specifically of Reza Pahlavi. In Istanbul, meanwhile, demonstrations voicing support for the Iranian protesters gathered despite rainfall. The police cordoned off the area outside the Iranian consulate and the crowd was kept away from the mission. Right, now I'm joined by Mr. Hafid Boutaleb. He is geopolitics and international relations analyst. He's joining us live from Casablanca at the moment. Good evening. Welcome to WION, Mr. Boutaleb. I want to start by asking you about the Iranian diaspora, how they have been voicing their support, because obviously many of them have left Iran citing the very reasons that the protesters right now inside Iran are saying. There are economic concerns and there is the so-called political suppression that they feel.
Well, you're right mentioning the Iranian diaspora. And thank you for the invitation before talking. Sorry for that. Yes, the position, the stance of the Iranian diaspora is critical to know how far is the regime is now unpopular, because many of these diaspora are still connected with relatives in Iran, and previously they were avoiding to expose themselves. And if now they are stepping forward, it means that the anger has reached unprecedented levels. But also it is important to see the popularity of the heir to the throne, Ali Reza, who claims now to be the person for the accurate person to lead the transition. And to check his affirmation, the behavior of the diaspora is critical. If we notice, like the videos you were showing, people raising the flag, the
Yes.
Monarchy flag, as we noticed in London, Paris, etc. If it goes massive outside Iran, it means that is massive even inside Iran. So the diaspora will reflect quite faithfully the situation from inside Iran. What I want to say is, it's not because of 50 years of regime and some people are exiled since 50 years that they are disconnected from Iran. The diaspora still reflects the reality of the Iranian street, despite the claims of the officials of the Iranian regime.
Mr. Boutaleb, while you talk about the diaspora, I also want to talk about the pro-government protests that have been witnessed across Iran today. That is also a large number. It's seen as a counter-protest to what is happening. How do you see it? Do you see that as the regime's move to sort of, suppress the ongoing protests, or is it an answer to what they have been saying? Because the pro-government protesters are saying that, look, this government, this regime has worked for the benefit of Iran and they should continue. And the protests that are happening against the regime are those that are funded by America and Israel.
This is, of course, a too simplistic and too simple perspective. Let's recall just some historical facts. Since 2009, the elections, or presidential elections of 2009, and the failure of the regime to renew itself and regain the results to steal the victory from the reformists who belong to the regime and keep it for the conservative, this has trickled since then successive demonstrations and unrests in Iran. There were the 2009 unrest related to this election, the 2016 unrest, the 2017-18 unrest at the occasion of the 40th anniversary of the so-called revolution, the 2019-20 unrests, where, let's recall, the Iranian military have shot down an airplane belonging to the national Iranian air company. So the regime is in a harsh difficulty since 2009, since it has locked all horizon and since it has failed to renew itself and excluded the reformists who before took part to the revolution, were faithful to Ali Khamenei, but were excluded totally from the power. And this has led to this stalemate where only the very harsh conservatives are in charge in Iran. So yes, when you mention these demonstrations, I will say that it is very important and critical for the regime now to keep the loyalists, because there are doubts spreading even within the loyalists to the regime. Also because of this inability of the regime to renew itself, for the succession crisis around Ali Khamenei, and you know that his son, Murtaba Khamenei, is mentioned as a potential successor. So it shows how far the succession crisis, the economic crisis, because of also of the decrease in oil prices, has severely struck the regime. So far, I think that.
So we'll have to wait and watch how this moves forward. I'll have to leave it there. Thank you very much, Mr. Hafid Butleb, for joining us. Let's wait and watch what happens in the next few weeks and months for Iran. For now, of course, the situation remaining tense. Thank you very much for joining us.
With pleasure.
All right, moving on. In the United States of America, the battle between President Donald Trump and Federal Reserve Chair Jerome Powell is heating up. Powell says that the Department of Justice has issued grand jury subpoenas to the Federal Reserve, threatening a possible criminal indictment linked to his congressional testimony last June. Powell also says that the testimony focused on the multi-year renovation of the Fed's historic headquarters, which he described as necessary infrastructure upgrades. Calling the legal action a pretext, Powell said it represents a dramatic escalation in pressure on the central bank.
The threat of criminal charges is a consequence of the Federal Reserve setting interest rates based on our best assessment of what will serve the public, rather than following the preferences of the president.
The move comes amid rising tensions between Powell and Trump, who has reportedly and repeatedly criticized the Federal Reserve for not cutting interest rates aggressively. Since the second half of 2025, the Fed has cut rates thrice, but Trump has argued that the reductions are insufficient and has blamed Fed policy for slowing America's economic growth. The White House has yet to officially respond on these subpoenas and has referred questions to the Justice Department. But Powell has warned that legal threats tied to monetary policy decisions risk undermining the Federal Reserve's independence, which is a cornerstone of American economic stability. Meanwhile, critics say that any attempt to intimidate or remove the Fed chair over interest rate decisions could weaken investor confidence and politicize the American monetary policy. The dispute now raises broader questions about the balance of power between the White House, the Justice Department, and the independent central bank.
This is about whether the Fed will be able to continue to set interest rates based on evidence and economic conditions, or whether instead monetary policy will be directed by political pressure or intimidation. I have served at the Federal Reserve under 4 administrations, Republicans and Democrats alike. In every case, I have carried out my duties without political fear or favor, focused solely on our mandate of price stability and maximum employment.
However, Trump said that he had no knowledge of the Justice Department's investigation into the Fed. But Trump also criticized the Fed chair, saying that Powell has, quote, hurt a lot of people. I think the public is pressuring him. Trump also blamed Powell once again for keeping interest rates too high. And our correspondent Susan Tehrani is joining us live on the broadcast from New York. Susan, the ongoing tussle between Donald Trump and Jerome Powell continues to get deeper. Any word from Donald Trump yet? It's morning there in United States. It's a few hours since Jerome Powell said that he's been issued subpoenas. Any word from the White House or Donald Trump himself on this?
The White House defers any comments to the Justice Department, and the Justice Department has put out a statement to some media outlets locally here in the United States, nationwide, saying that the United States government, the White House, is not going to allow for taxpayer dollars to be abused, referring to what basically Jerome Powell, they believe, at least in the preliminary stages of this investigation, has done with that new building that was very expensive. But nonetheless, he has been subpoenaed. There are threats and the possibility of criminal charges, although a subpoena does not mean that. It could not get to that. It also doesn't automatically mean that he'll be indicted. Really, it's at the first stages, but it does signal the seriousness of it for subpoenaing Jerome Powell.
Absolutely. Susan, thanks very much for joining us at the moment and getting us the latest. Of course, we'll have to wait and watch where this tussle finally concludes. Thanks very much. Cuba is facing renewed threats from Washington. American President Donald Trump is pushing the Cuban government to the breaking point. The communist establishment at the heart of the Caribbean has been a point of frustration for Washington for the last 6 decades. And once again, the United States is gradually raising the heat on Cuba. Trump has issued an ultimatum. Cuba must make a deal before it is too late. This ultimatum does not have any deadline, and it also lacks a clear outline about what type of deal Trump wants from Havana. Earlier, the U.S. president reposted a message that jokingly suggested that U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio, who is the child of Cuban immigrants, could also become the president of Cuba. Threats from Washington have drawn an angry retort from Havana. President Miguel Diaz-Canel has said that no one would tell his country what to do. In fact, Diaz-Canel added that Cuba is ready to defend the homeland to the last drop of blood. The renewed tensions come after the capture of Venezuelan President Nicolás Maduro. According to Trump, Maduro provided Cuba with oil, while Cuba gave him manpower. Trump says Maduro's capture has severed the link between Caracas and Havana. With the U.S. exercising an oil blockade over Venezuela, Trump believes that Maduro's ouster leaves Cuba ready to fall. These fresh tensions between Washington and Havana revive memories of an old crisis. The origin of the tumultuous relationship dates back to the 1960s. That was when communist revolutionary Fidel Castro and Che Guevara overthrew dictator Fulgencio Batista in Cuba and established a communist government. This was the time when a war of ideological dominance was underway between US and Soviet Union. Cuba's proximity to America left Washington worried, and it led to a covert US operation in 1961. In fact, Cuba was close to the Soviet Union, and under Operation Bay of Pigs, US-backed Cuban exiles attempted to overthrow Fidel Castro. But the operation resulted in a humiliating defeat for the Americans, and a year later came the infamous Cuban Missile Crisis. The U.S. imposed a naval blockade on Cuba under John F. Kennedy, and this is when Cuba became the battleground of a superpower showdown. The world came ever closer to a full-blown nuclear war at this time. The crisis ended after the U.S. promised not to invade Cuba in return for the withdrawal of Soviet nuclear missiles from the island nation. Since then, both the U.S. and Cuba have continued to have hostile relations. A Cold War-era U.S. trade embargo continues to rattle Cuba's economy. With Maduro gone, Havana is once again in Washington's crosshairs, marking the rebirth of a half-a-century-old crisis. And shifting our focus now, the clock is ticking on the EU-South American Mercosur deal, an agreement which has been in the making for the last 25 years. It will be signed on the 17th of this month. But farmers across Europe are still agitating against this agreement, which is almost through. Now, across France, farmers are engaging in different tactics to exert more pressure on the government in taking a stance against the Mercosur deal. Farmers were seen blocking lorries at the port of Le Havre as agitation in the country continues to unfold. In another part of France, hundreds protested on Sunday last by blocking key transport routes. The demonstration unions say that the plan is to keep the roadblocks intact for a few days.
It's more of a societal or professional issue. It's really a food and health issue. So we've made efforts. Farmers have made efforts. Everyone is making efforts. We're not going to ruin our children, our consumers, and our food with the stroke of a pen.
The French leadership has repeatedly opposed the trade agreement, but there has been overwhelming support from other states in the bloc. Farmers in Ireland carried out a similar protest over the weekend after European Union member states paved the way for the agreement to be signed. The Irish agriculture community condemned the lack of support across the bloc and urged more people to rally against the deal. Despite regular demonstrations across European countries, most member states have still decided to go ahead with the landmark trade deal. 5 days from now, EU chief Ursula von der Leyen will sign the free trade agreement with 4 Latin American countries. Shifting our focus now to the African continent, Sudan is reeling under a deadly civil war between the country's armed forces and the Rapid Support Forces paramilitary group. And after nearly 3 years of fighting, the Sudanese government is now all set to return to the capital, Khartoum. Sudan's Prime Minister, Kamil Idris, has made the announcement, and so far the government has been functioning from the wartime capital of Port Sudan. But now, with Khartoum back in the control of the Sudanese armed forces, the city will again be the base of Sudan's government. The Sudanese armed forces withdrew from Khartoum in 2023, but the battle for the city continued for at least 2 years. Tens of thousands of people were killed in Khartoum, and the capital was finally recaptured by the Sudanese military in March last year. Millions of displaced people have returned to Khartoum since then. The civil war has now moved to other key cities. The focus has shifted from Khartoum to the Darfur region, which was an army stronghold, but is currently under the control of the RSF. A joint military operation is currently underway in Darfur and the North Kordofan state. According to the Sudanese army, the RSF have withdrawn from border areas and government forces are now surging ahead. The civil war in Sudan has left 11 million people displaced, both internally and across borders. This has created the world's largest displacement and hunger crises. According to the UN, 50% of Sudan's population is in need of humanitarian aid, and the country is facing extreme shortage of food, water, and medicines. Myanmar has just wrapped up the second phase of its elections, and the party backed by the ruling military junta claims to have taken a major electoral scalp. They say that they have won Aung San Suu Kyi's old parliamentary seat. The second round of Myanmar's three-phase election took place on Sunday. 100 townships went to polls, and among them was the symbolic constituency of Kamu. It's the seat last represented by pro-democracy leader and former state councillor Aung San Suu Kyi. Suu Kyi remains detained. She was locked up by Myanmar's junta after the coup in 2021. Her son, Kim Aris, recently said that no one had heard from her directly since 2023, and all the information they had been given came from the junta. Aung San Suu Kyi's son said that he feared that his mother might be dead. After the coup and Suu Kyi's arrest, her National League for Democracy was banned. Some of its leaders are reportedly contesting this election as independents. However, no independent won a single seat during the first phase of polls, which was held on the 28th of December last year. The first phase saw the junta-backed Union Solidarity and Development Party win 89 out of the 102 seats. In the previous polls back in 2020, the same junta-backed party had won just 26 out of 330 seats. Their success this time around is being seen as proof that the junta is overseeing a sham election, and that the party has claimed even more success after Sunday's second election phase. A USDP official has claimed that the party has won Suu Kyi's old seat, Kamu. The official chose to remain anonymous because they didn't have authorization to share results, but they did say that the junta-backed party won 15 of the 16 seats that went to polls in Myanmar's Yangon region, and Kamu was among them. Myanmar's ongoing election is widely considered as a sham. The polls are seen as a way for Myanmar's junta to consolidate its hold on power and add a veneer of legitimacy to its rule. The final phase will take place on the 25th of January, where 63 constituencies will go to polls. American President Donald Trump has taken yet another swipe at Venezuela. Trump shared a fake Wikipedia page that called him as the acting president of Venezuela. Take a look. And with that, it's a wrap on Race to Power. But of course, news and updates will continue on WION. Thank you very much for joining us tonight. Bye-bye.
India's global voice, the channel that brings you the biggest stories from across the world through India's lens. Now available in more than 190 countries worldwide. Because we believe that the world is one. Watch us in Africa, Europe, USA and Canada, South America, Asia Pacific, Middle East and North African regions. Also available on these digital platforms across the world. WION. World is one.
Where darkness hides behind every corner. Where the truth is stranger than fiction. A show that dives deep into the stories which shock and mystify. Unsolved murders. Psychopaths who defy explanation. International war crimes, and millions swindled in financial fraud. The victims, the accused, and the sinister plot. Prime is your front row seat to darkness.
The world's most powerful minds gather. decisions that shape our future are made. From the Swiss Alps to you. Starting January 19th, WION will deep dive into the significance of what global leaders are deliberating at the World Economic Forum. The coverage will feature key roundtable discussions every day with top analysts at WION's headquarters. Stay tuned as we break down key themes from the Davos Forum to make it simple and engaging for you, only on WION.
The stress of our world can take a toll on our physical and emotional health. Here, in New York's Catskill Mountains, lies a luxurious place of healing called WION Wellness Center. The WION Wellness Center provides 500,000 square feet of natural methods to manage diabetes, hypertension, chronic pain, obesity, depression, anxiety, and other conditions. We use the traditions of centuries-old natural science from India, yoga, Ayurveda, acupuncture, and naturopathy in personalized programs that help you take charge of your own health. A minimum 5-day stay is recommended for best results. Book now at yo1.com.
From the bustling trading floors of Wall Street to the vibrant exchanges of Asian stock markets, WION breaks it down for you to make sense of what's happening, as we reveal the key factors behind events, strategic battles, and the game-changing business decisions that shape the world. We bring you all of this and more on World Business Watch.